Welcome to the Energy Audit Training. It's October 22nd, 2024. We're excited to present this training. It's a training put together by Econometrica Inc., along with HUD's Energy Branch. Go ahead to the next slide, Sarah. So I'm going to turn this over to Charles Marshall from HUD's Energy Branch to do an introduction.
Thank you, Alex. And greet you from the Energy Branch. I'm the director in the Energy Branch, which is a part of the Financial Management Division of the Office of Public Housing Programs. We're excited about this training on energy auditing. And it is a good practice for not only good utility management, good facility management, but even in capital planning. And there's really exciting material that has been put together in this training, and we encourage each of you to use it, and you'll find that you're able to use it not only in public housing, but also in many other settings. So with that, I'll hand it off to Joshua Smith, who's also with the office of, in our office of the Energy Branch, and we'll proceed. So thank you again for being here.
Josh, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. Sorry, I'm Joshua Smith. I'm an energy management specialist with the Public Housing Energy Branch. And I got a good program about energy auditing prepared for you today. And me and Alex will be presenting. So hope you enjoy. If you got any questions, please feel free to use the chat during the meeting, and we'll address some of those in the chat, or we'll also have questions at the end. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Joshua. My name's Alex Thackeray. I'm with Econometrica. I'll be the primary presenter today, although Charles and Joshua will be jumping in as well. Assisted by Jennifer Stoloff in the presentation, and my colleague Sarah Gillum is helping run the presentation and run technical issues. We've got two things. If you wiggle your mouse and you look at least the bottom of my screen, you'll see there's a chat button, and there's also a Q&A button. We're going to try and keep the questions in the Q&A section and keep the chat clear for technical issues. I believe we've got the chat set up so only the hosts and panelists can see the chat. So if you have a technical issue, you can put it there. And if you've got questions for us all, we'd like to have that shared with the group. So if you put those in the Q&A. Our approach to this webinar is iterative. We're going to start high level, and then we're going to get into greater detail. So if you're wondering what something is, maybe wait a few slides to see if we cover it before you put that into your questions. We've got 2 hours blocked off. When we did a practice for this, the presentation took a little more than an hour, so we should have plenty of time to cover your questions at the end. We are recording this webinar. The recording will be available along with the transcript on the HUD Exchange, probably in the next 2 weeks or so. Next slide, Sarah. So what we're going to talk about today is, again, going from sort of a big picture and then getting into the details. We're going to do an energy audit. Going to talk about really what we're going to try and do is sell you all on doing an energy audit. There's a lot of benefits to it, and we're going to go over those in detail. We're also going to talk about what it requires from you. It's not a passive exercise. We're going to touch on how do you pay for an energy audit, which I know is a big issue and a big question. That's probably some of the questions that are popping up already. How do I pay for it? We're going to talk about that. The energy audit ends up with a written report. It's a nice report. It looks good on table, but it looks even better in your hands using it. So we're going to talk about how you can use the information in that report. How is an energy audit done? This is where we're going to get into some of the nuts and bolts. And again, this is an example of the iteration. We're going to talk about, the scope of energy audit, audit in broad sentences earlier, or we're going to get into the details of what the different levels are, what the standards are, when we get into how an energy audit is done. Then we'll wrap up and do questions and answers. Next slide. We do have a brand new landing page for energy audits on the HUD Exchange. It was launched, I believe, late yesterday or this morning. It's not quite complete yet. We've had some production issues. We expect all of the tools to be up by the end of the month, so next week sometime. So check back. There are resources available now. There's some information on energy audit standards. There's more information basically on a lot of things we're going to talk about today. There are examples of energy audit financial analyses, some other resources and information. We will have copies of the slides posted as well once we've got the recording up. It's like your standard HUD technical assistance webinar. It's the same sort of process. We'll also send out an email to let you all know when those resources are all available. Next slide. So let's start with why should you do an energy audit? That's why you all are here. Let's sell it to you. Next slide. So an energy audit, in big picture, broad terms, determines how energy is used in a building or development and identifies options to improve efficiency and save money. These options are called energy conservation measures, or ECMs. An energy audit is really useful because it can define scope of energy projects for the PHA. Joshua and Charles are going to talk later about HUD's energy incentive programs. The first step to access those programs really is to do an energy audit, and that's going to be how you get the most value out of those programs as well. What you find is the energy audit is going to show you how you can save money on energy and on your utilities. For an example of that, we look in 2023, PHA paid utility costs nationally were about $1.66 billion. So just a 10% efficiency improvement is going to translate into $166 million in savings. And that goes directly back to PHAs if you use the energy incentive programs. There's also additional savings for tenants. This is, not just a PHA thing. It also helps your tenants save money, especially if they're paying for their own utilities. Next slide. Some other benefits that you're going to find in the energy audit report. You're going to have a better understanding of your building systems, your operating expenses. You're going to really understand how energy and water is being used at your PHA and at your developments. It's going to give you clear options for reducing those utility expenses, and it's going to give you information for evaluating the energy incentive programs. Just going to say, again, we'll get into this in great detail later, but big picture, the energy incentive programs are a way to finance the energy conservation measures, the ECMs that are in the energy audit. So you'll get that funding up front, and then you pay it back through your savings. And what the energy audit's going to tell you is things like how long it's going to take to pay back, how much you can expect to save. And that's really useful information when you're planning out some of these bigger projects. Next slide. Finally, I'm going to try and sell this on you because it is a requirement. 24 CFR 965 subpart C does require that PHAs operating public housing units complete an energy audit every 5 years. So doing an energy audit is going to keep you in compliance. I do want to note that this is a requirement for public housing. It's not for voucher units and other housing that you might operate or be involved with. But those programs may have their own energy audit requirements. You also might have state or local energy audit requirements. This is just the federal public housing requirement. Next slide. So Now you should be excited about doing the energy audit. It's got some really good information. It opens doorways to these energy incentive programs, but it's going to cost some money. So how do you pay for it? Operating funds are the preferred source to pay for an energy audit. If the operating funds aren't available or sufficient, you can look at some other funding sources, capital funds. You can also look for grants, and talk to your local utilities. I know I live out in Denver. I know folks in Colorado and also in Minnesota. We get mail or emails about Xcel, our energy company, offering to do basically energy audits for us as residents. And those are the types of programs that utilities can offer to PHAs as well. So reach out to them, see if there's some opportunities to share costs, so you're not paying the full rate for it. But sometimes you also have to consider your procurement rules, and we'll touch on that later. Couple other things to think about: economies of scale and scope. If you've got multiple developments, do an energy audit for all of them at once instead of one at a time. You'll get that as economies of scale and save some money there. Energy auditors typically are architects or engineers, and they typically have other skills too. So if there's other physical inspections or assessments that you need done at your property or that you would like to have done, you can look at wrapping them up with an energy audit. So you've got the same person coming out and looking at multiple things instead of separate people coming out looking at the same things. So, finally, an energy services company can roll the cost of an EA into an energy performance contract. We'll talk about those a little bit later. But that way, the cost is already in your energy performance contract. It's used to access those energy incentives that Joshua and Charles are going to talk about later. And if for some reason your PHA doesn't pursue the EPC, you'll just reimburse the ESCO later. Next slide. Now, can you do the energy audit yourself? Big picture, yes, but all energy auditors must be certified. So you would have to have a certified energy auditor on staff. That's fairly rare. The certification requirements are not the easiest. The recertification, though, is usually the big barrier for PHAs to have a certified energy auditor on staff. We'll have a handout about those certification requirements in the toolkit, but generally we found that contracting out is a more feasible option. And you can look at the ESCOs, independent firms, or consultants. We do recommend that PHA staff accompany the auditor as they are on site. That gives your staff an opportunity to learn about energy audits and energy conservation measures, and helps interpret the energy audit report. Next slide. So some of the roles and responsibilities that you have during the energy audit. Before you have to do procurement, follow your procurement rules. We've got a handout in the toolkit, Why Do an Energy Audit, which is a great handout that you can use with your board of directors or with PHA leadership if you need to sort of convince them why they should do this. Follow your procurement rules, provide data as requested by the auditor. They're going to request some information. We're going to go into what that is in detail, but it's things you would expect: your utility bills, list of units, things like that. Your energy auditor, when they're on site, they're going to want to access units and facilities. They're going to want to access both occupied and vacant units. They'll be particularly interested in occupied units because vacant units tend not to use that much energy. So you'll need to arrange access for that and follow, again, your policies and procedures for unit access. During the energy audit, we strongly recommend that the auditor have an entrance and exit meeting with PHA senior staff. That lets senior staff know that the energy audit's happening. And at the end of the on-site portion, it gives a preview of what the auditor found. And then again, have someone from the PHA accompany the auditor, not only to learn about the energy audit process and the ECMs the auditor is considering, but also to help the auditor find things and access systems that they might need to look at. After the energy audit's over, you'll get the energy audit report. Don't just put it on a table or on the shelf. Read through it, use that information, look at those ECMs, plan how you're going to implement them, think about these energy incentive programs we're going to talk about. So what do you do with that energy audit report? Let's get a little more detailed into that. All right. So an energy audit report, one of the big things is those energy conservation measures. But you can also use it just as information about operating and budgeting for maintenance and repairs. And it's a great tool for strategic planning, and it opens up these energy incentive programs. But to really understand it, let's go off to the side a little bit, aside, and talk about the scope in a little more detail. And then let's also talk about these energy conservation measures. I think, we've thrown that out a couple of times. Let's put some concrete examples on it. So let's go. I will say, and as a side, we have these breaks because some folks will be looking at these slides and not have this discussion to go with them. So this is just a nice break, but it's, content we don't need to cover here. Next slide. All right, the scope. We get into super detail on this later, but right now, what you need to know is there's 3 general levels of an energy audit that change in complexity. Level 1 is a site assessment. It's pretty basic. Level 2 is a more detailed energy survey. Level 3 is a very detailed analysis. It's also sometimes called a investment grade energy audit. The levels build on each other. So a level 3 report will have everything that's in a level 1 and level 2 report. A level 1 energy audit is sufficient to meet its requirement, the CFR 5-year requirement we mentioned. State and localities may have more extensive requirements. Certain programs and incentives require specific energy audit level. For example, the energy performance contract that HUD runs, that we'll talk about in a little bit, that requires a level 3 energy audit. If any of you have done a RAD conversion or looked at that, you know that part of a RAD conversion involves a level 2 energy audit. So again, the level 1 is your bare minimum. It meets that requirement, but the higher levels, the more detailed energy audits can be required for some of the things you might want to do. Next slide. Energy and water conservation measures. So what these are really things that you can do or you can install that can help conserve energy, conserve water. And there's a range of them. They're really broken down into 3 categories. So when we talk about them, there's core ECMs, advanced ECMs, and supportive ECMs. So let's go to the next slide and look at some specific core ECMs. So these are common, cost-effective conservation measures, and they've been shown to reduce energy and water consumption. There's 5 groups when you think about it, when you get into it and start discussing them. And there's a lot of measures within these groups. They're building envelopes, so things like attic insulation, doors and windows, heating, cooling, other mechanical equipment. This can be, the actual mechanical equipment, your water heater or your HVAC system, but it can also be smaller things like duct sealing. There's water conservation, the lead flow toilets and faucets, power, lighting systems, and controls. LED light bulbs, I'll tell you right now, I'll do some of your energy audit for free right now. If your development or building doesn't have all LED light bulbs, that will be one of the ECMs that's in the energy audit report. But what the report's going to tell you is it's going to tell you how much it costs to install those LED bulbs and how much money you're going to save by installing those bulbs. And it's going to give you specific numbers that you can use for planning. Appliances, Energy Star rated appliances. Again, this is where the energy audit report provides a lot of detail. Energy Star usually costs a little bit more with the idea that you're going to save money over the long run. The energy audit report is going to go in, look at your appliances, look at the needs for those appliances and the options out there, and tell you sometimes down to the penny, how much you're going to save and how long it's going to take to pay back that extra upfront cost for Energy Star appliances. So the core ECMs are going to be included in all of your energy audit reports. Next slide. Advanced ECMs are more advanced. They're generally not covered in a level 1 energy audit. They're in level 2 or level 3 energy audits. This is something that you're interested in more advanced ECMs. You should note that in the procurement package so the energy auditor knows that you're interested in learning more or considering them. These are facility scale systems, larger things, solar panels, solar parks, other renewable energy. It's also advanced technologies. If there's stuff that you've heard about but you don't know very much about, this is a great option to find out more about it, find out how it would fit with your PHA. I know heat pumps are pretty popular right now. I sort of understand them, but I couldn't look at my house and say, should I get a heat pump or should I just keep my forced air heat? I just don't know enough about it. But I could have an energy auditor come in and not only tell me about what a heat pump is and how it works, but give me some numbers on how much it will cost to install and how much I would save with the heat pump versus forced air system. So there's a lot of advances happening with in energy conservation right now. Your energy auditor is going to be very knowledgeable about those and can help educate you about them. Next slide. The last type of ECM that we're looking at are called supportive ECMs, and they are supportive of the core and the advanced ECMs. The idea with supportive ECMs is they don't directly lead to energy savings, but they support other things. Theoretically they do. One of the supportive ECMs would be like lighting controls or temperature sensors. And you say to yourself, well, that's just going to lead to less energy use because it's going to turn things off when people aren't in the room. Theoretically that makes sense, but it's not actually, it's not the lighting itself. It's the fact that it's being turned on and off. So it's supportive of saving energy. This is kind of a key distinction because the supportive ECMs, to really use them in Access HUD's energy incentive programs, you need a core ECM or an advanced ECM. You can't just rely on a supportive ECM. So for all the ECMs, we've got more information about them and some handouts with pictures and descriptions in the toolkit, so you can find out a little bit more about them before you have the energy auditor come out. So when they have a list of them in the energy audit report, you're kind of familiar with what they're talking about. Next slide. All right, so the energy audit report. Let's talk about what's actually in there. It's not just ECMs, but that is the big thing. They all will include the core ECMs, and they're going to talk about some other things having to do with energy use. You're going to have several previous energy audits. They're going to talk about building components and systems, how they affect energy consumption. They're going to look at your utility bills. They're going to do a nice analysis. We've got an example of that coming up. And it's really nice, I think, because it takes a lot of information that you see monthly, and it gets you sort of a bigger picture trend for it. It helps you really think about it a different way. Next slide. All right. So as far as the ECMs that are included in there, they're going to talk about all the ECMs they've considered, projected costs. They're going to calculate payback periods, which is basically how long it would take for the savings to equal the cost of installing the ECM. They're going to categorize them by payback period. The ones that are less than 2 years, you might be able to just pay for up front out of your operating funds. If it's going to take more than 2 years, you're probably going to have to look at financing it through one of HUD's energy incentive programs. It's going to give you those annual savings, and it's also going to give you some information on the useful life and replacement time frame for the ECMs. A more advanced, the level 2 or level 3, will get into the timeline for ECM implementation. It will also give you some more information on ECM maintenance. Some of the ECMs are the same. An LED light bulb, you maintain it the same way as you maintain a fluorescent light bulb. When it doesn't turn on, you replace it. But if you get into some other ECMs, if you're looking at a tankless water heater, that's got different maintenance than a tank water heater. A tankless water heater, you don't have a pilot light to worry about. You've got less piping, less area for leaks, but you might have some other things. There's a heat exchange in there. It's a tankless water heater is actually more like a furnace than like a tank water heater. So it's got different things to consider for maintenance, and the energy audit will have information on that. But couple other things that your more advanced level 2 or level 3 reports will include. They'll include the energy use intensity and energy cost index, which are by the square foot information. That's used for benchmarking. The energy auditor can tell you more about that. But there's various sources of benchmarking for different types of buildings out there. So you'll be able to or the energy auditor will be able to tell you how you compare it to other buildings in the area, other multifamily buildings, single-family homes, duplexes, whatever your units are. You can look at how they compare. The level 2 or 3 report can also discuss some specific advanced ECMs. Again, try and put that information in your procurement package so the energy auditor knows to expect it. The more advanced reports can also talk about partners for doing installation. One of the advantages of an energy auditor is they're definitely tuned in to all of this stuff, and they've got contacts with utilities, they've got contacts with installers, so they're going to have a lot of information they can share with you about moving forward with ECMs. Next slide. So finally, here's just a quick example of what you would see in an energy audit report. We've got this as a handout in the toolkit, and it'll be up by the end of the month. But things that you can look for in here, you've got your certification disclaimers, make sure that your auditor is certified. The purpose and scope, make sure that what they covered in the report is what you asked them to cover in the procurement scope of work. The summary of the ECM is something you can share with leadership or with the board, but you as a practitioner are going to want to look at in this version, in this table of contents, section 5, where you're really looking at the details of their energy efficiency measures. You're also going to get some information on your properties, property description, what they looked at, what they saw. You're going to get your utility analysis. So One of the things you can do with the energy audit, besides the ECMs, is the budgeting, planning, and maintenance. Let's talk a little bit more about this. And this is where we get into an example of those, looking at utility costs over a longer term. Next slide. So, these are examples of things that you could see, and I want to go over these in a little more detail. Because I think they're a different way than folks usually look at their utilities, and it gives you a lot of information in a different format. These are things that you could see in your energy audit report that are useful, even if you don't look at any of the ECMs. On the left, we've got sort of a table of your electricity use. September through January, so this is the end of the summer into the beginning of winter. One of the things I want to point out there is in October, from September to October, your cost per kilowatt hour goes up 2 cents, which turns out to be a lot because you're using 20,000 kilowatt hours per month. You can see September it's high because you've got your air conditioner running. October, November, it's done lower, and then it starts creeping up in December and January. I think, if I saw this, I'd say, well, we're not using the air conditioner. We're using, forced air heat. So the gas expense should go up. Natural gas expense should go up. But electricity really shouldn't in the winter, especially not that much. What that's telling me is there might be an issue with your residents using electric space heaters, which means your forced air heat may not be sufficient for your residents. So that might be something to look at. Over on the right, you can see that same information in graphic form. You can see the usage goes down. This is really where you see the increase in cost per kilowatt hour, which is the purple line. It goes down, but then it goes back up, and you're looking at September and January. Your costs for electricity are about the same, even though you're using about 3,000 fewer kilowatt hours in January, and that's that. Little extra cost can be a lot, and this really visualizes that for you and can help you in your budgeting. Something that the energy audit report might also do is a lot of energy auditors know what's coming down the pipe from the utility, so and it's something you can ask for, but they can look and they can project future utility expenses, not just in terms of what you'll be using, but the cost for those utilities. Next slide. When it gets into the energy conservation measures, there's budgeting and planning for those too. Like I mentioned earlier, they'll do the simple payback period. I've got an example here that is super simple. If an ECM costs $100 to install, it saves $25 per year. Without considering inflation or anything else, you're going to pay back the installation in 4 years. We've got examples of that in the toolkit as well. You can use this information for a number of ECMs. I should make it clear, the energy audit is not going to just give you one ECM. It's going to give you as many as seem feasible. Even, the simplest, developments or houses are probably going to have 5 to 10 ECMs. So this information will help you budget and plan out how you're going to implement them. It's what we like to call bundling, where you're using the low cost, higher payback ECMs to help balance out higher cost, lower or longer payback term ECMs. So you bundle them together. It helps with your budgeting and your planning. And want to note that you can use your operating funds for the ECMs. You can also include ECMs in your capital improvements or modernization. I'm going to do a little aside here too and say, ECMs that are identified for your public housing through this energy audit. A lot of them are things that you could apply to other housing that you might be involved with, such as vouchers or if you have market rate housing that you own or operate. Think of the energy audit as focused and it's looking at your public housing, but the concepts that are in there can be applied to other housing you're involved with. Next slide. Strategic planning. It's a lot of good information that you can use for strategic planning if you're thinking, long-term, 5+ years or really big projects. The energy audit information, you're going to get a lot of information in the energy audit report about your buildings, about the systems in those buildings. So you're going to have some ideas of what might need to be replaced, what their remaining useful life is for some of these items. If you have carbon reduction goals, the energy audit is great for helping you meet those. If you're looking for major rehabilitation, if you're looking at an energy performance contract, if you're looking at repositioning, the energy audit has a lot of information that helps inform those decisions. Do want to note that the incentives that we cover in this training, and we're covering, I think, in the next section, those are for public housing units. So if you do reposition away from public housing, those incentives can go away. That said, there are occasional advantages to starting an energy performance contract or another incentive program prior to the repositioning. And there's more details on that if you look at some of the guidance for the EPC, and that there's a link for that on the HUD Exchange. There's also going to be some upcoming training in the next 6 months or so on energy performance contracts. So finally, you can look into partnering with local utilities. You as a PHA are a major nonprofit customer for your local utilities. They do want to work with you. They get benefits out of it. You get benefits out of it. The energy audit is what great way to break the ice and really create a partnership there that's beneficial to both of you. Next slide. Finally, we've got some things about maintenance and repairs. Again, those ECMs can be specialized equipment. They're different equipment. The energy audit report will have information on how to maintain them, how to repair them. You can also talk to the manufacturer for guidance and training. And, if you're doing an energy performance contract with an ESCO, they're going to have resources around that as well. But the energy audit will give you some baseline ideas of, what to expect in terms of maintenance, of the time, the expected useful life of these fixtures or equipment, and just give you a better idea. So you're not just going in blind and you say, let's do this. And then, it opens up a can of worms later. You'll be prepared. Next slide. All right. Let me turn it over to Joshua to talk about HUD's energy incentive programs.
Hello, I'm Joshua Smith, and I'm going to present the next couple slides. So oftentimes, determining how you're going to pay for the findings from your energy audit, that can be as difficult, or maybe more difficult than simply finding the ECMs and vetting them. So public housing has a lot of opportunities, different ways of funding your ECMs, and the energy audit is the first step. Identify the things you want to work on, and then the next step would be figuring out how you're going to execute those projects and implement the energy audit. So next slide, please. So here's, on this slide here, we've got a variety of programs. So some national programs, there's some state and local programs, and then there's some other resources. So The first link there, that is the Public Housing Energy Branch website. And on that website, you'll find links to all of our major incentive programs. And we're going to talk about those on the next slide, so I won't get into those. The next link there is from the Department of Energy, and they've got a lot of incentive programs that you can look at. The next link is this is from North Carolina State University, the database of state incentives and renewable and efficiency for renewables and efficiency. So that site's really easy to use if you haven't used it before. It takes you to a map of the United States. When you first click on it, click on your state, and it shows you all the incentive programs that are available in your state. And then there's hyperlinks on those. You can drill down, and start browsing those. Another resource that's pretty similar to that is HUD has built the Built for the Future Funding Navigator. It's pretty similar to the last link, to the Desire database, but it's got some different search options. You can search for certain types of opportunities. Again, you can search by location, and makes it a little bit easier to navigate. But pretty similar information there. I guess the point of all those is it's additional ways to get your arms around somebody else's money, and we all love free money, so that's the point. Next slide, please. Okay, so HUD's kind of flagship program for funding energy conservation measures traditionally has been the EPC program. So what's great about the EPC program is it's long term. You have up to 20 years by statute to pay off your implementation. You can do it. You can do a self-directed EPC. You can use an energy services company to help you. You can use a consultant. Lots of different ways of going about it. So a lot of times when you use an ESCO, there's an option for guaranteed savings, which is great because it lowers the risk to the housing authority that the project's not going to perform, or if the project doesn't perform, the ESCO pays you back the missing savings. So inside the EPC program, there's three incentive types. There's the frozen rolling base incentive, there's the add-on subsidy, and then there's the resident paid utilities incentive. So this is not a class on EPC. There's a couple hour class just about EPC, so we're not going to go into all the details, but we just want to let you know that it's out there and it's a good way of attacking your findings from an energy audit. Next slide, please. Okay, on this slide, we've got the other main HUD incentives. So the Utility Partnership Program, this is a relatively new program. It's, in a nutshell, it's very, very similar to the EPC program. It's got the same kind of incentives. It's targeted towards small and mid-size PHAs, smaller projects. And the difference between UPP and EPC is that you're working with your utility company. So, and there are a lot of utility companies that will do this kind of partnership with you to develop energy conservation projects. The next program is the Small Rural Frozen Rolling Base. So this program is designed specifically for the small rural housing authorities, and there's an official list of which housing authorities are small and rural, and we can direct you to that list if needed. Let us know. In this program, it's very, very simple. All you have to do is say, we want to freeze our utilities, and we'll freeze your utilities for up to 20 years. That's not the point, really. The point is that you do some kind of energy conservation work, you freeze your utilities, and then you get to retain the utility savings over 20 years to help pay for the work that caused the energy reduction. And then the last main incentive program is the rate reduction incentive. And what this is where you go out and generally you go out and find a better rate for your electricity or your natural gas. And then HUD incentivizes you for doing that legwork of finding a better rate. And we share the cost savings with you. Next slide, please. Okay, on this slide, I've got a couple slides here about renewable energy, about solar. So we've got some general statements here, and then we've got an example. So there's a lot of money through the Inflation Reduction Act. There's a lot of money in general, a lot of interest right now in installing renewables, solar, and wind, and electrification and decarbonization, and all these things. So there's lots of ways of going about it. So with the housing authorities, we've seen some housing authorities install their own solar on their own properties, either on the roofs or on some adjacent land, do some ground-mounted solar, or they've collaborated with in their communities, and they've done some of these community solar gardens or power purchase agreements, or like I said, there's a lot of different ways of going at it. Next slide, please. So here's an example. So we've got I'll let you read it, but basically this housing authority established a power purchase agreement with a solar provider. So what a power purchase agreement is, somebody else owns and operates the solar array, and then they sell you solar kilowatt hours at a reduced rate, cheaper than your utility company could provide to you, which is pretty cool. So you get a cost savings and you get a carbon reduction. So in this case, the savings was $115,000 a year, and a 25-year contract. And through the rate reduction incentive, they applied for the rate reduction incentive. They're going to get to retain at least 50% of that. If they did it in conjunction with an EPC project, they would get to retain 100% of those savings for the term. So that's the goodness of that. And with that, I think I'm turning this back over to Alex. Thank you.
Thanks, Joshua. Just some examples of the programs that are available through HUD, as well as some programs available through other agencies. There's also state and local incentive programs that you should look into. But the money there is, it can be a lot, $115,000 a year over 25 years. That's almost $3 million right there, just for kind of signing a couple pieces of paper and making a good partnership. So it's there's a lot there, and the energy audit is going to open those doors for you. So let's talk about the energy audit itself. This is where we're getting into a lot of the real detail, nitty gritty. So if there's stuff you have still have questions on that aren't answered in these last few sections, go ahead and put those in the Q&A section, the Q&A box. Again, if you shake your mouse, look at the bottom of the screen, or at least the bottom of my screen. There's a Q&A section, and you can enter your questions there. We're running a little ahead of schedule, so we should have plenty of time to talk about questions that you have right now. And the Energy Up branch guys are definitely available for more complicated questions that you might have when you start really getting into the details of looking at an EPC or some of these other incentive programs. So the process for the energy audit, actually doing it, going out and getting it, and then working with the report. You start out with your scoping and procurement. And this is where we're going to really talk about the energy audit standards in detail. We're going to talk a little bit about the RFP process, or however you all do procurement, some things to keep in mind as you do it. Prior to the auditor coming out on site, they're going to ask for some data. You should also prepare for their site visit. The auditor will be on site, they'll do an inspection assessment, and then following that, they'll prepare the report, which will include the ECMs, and then hand it off to you all to implement those ECMs. So next slide. All right, let's talk about the energy audit standards and get into even more detail on the difference between the three levels of energy audits. Next slide. So very first of all, I want to make clear there's not a specific energy audit standard for public housing, but there's generally accepted standards. The industry, everyone in the industry, even if they're not certified by ASHRA, they understand the difference between a level 1, level 2, and level 3. And a level 1 energy audit is sufficient to meet HUD's requirement for the energy audit. But as we've mentioned previously, you generally want a more detailed level 2 or level 3 energy audit to access the incentive programs. So a level 1 is a site assessment, preliminary audit. It's fairly general. It's not super detailed. The level 2 is an energy survey, an engineering analysis audit. That gets into more detail. And then level 3 is the detailed analysis or the investment grade audit. And that has the most detail and the most accurate numbers to go with your ECMs. So ASHRA is one of the major organizations that certifies energy auditors. Another major one is called Building Performance Institute. Their standards are specific for detached single family and for townhouses. So if you have developments that are primarily that, you might want to look for a BPI certified energy auditor as opposed to ASHRA certified energy auditor. But in the big picture, they're similar certifications. We've got information on the certification process if you were looking to get your staff certified in the toolkit. The toolkit also includes links to the specific standards, the ASHRA standard 2011, 2018, and then the BPI standards. If you want to go in there and you want to look at the nitty gritty of what these standards are, it's pretty detailed. It's interesting if you really, really want to know this stuff, but you can also just make sure that your energy auditor is certified and trust that that certification means that they're qualified and going to give you a good energy audit. Next slide. So level 1, it's going to look at your low or no cost ECMs. It's going to look at, it's going to have those LED lights. It's going to have the low fault load toilets and faucets. It's going to look at your windows, building envelope. It's not going to look at things like solar panels. It's probably not going to look at more advanced technology like heat pumps. They are going to look at your utility bills. They'll do a walkthrough of your development. They'll look in some units. It won't be a scientific sample of units or a representative sample of the units, but it is going to catch those obvious energy issues. And it is sufficient to meet HUD standards. It may not be sufficient to meet state or local standards. It's not sufficient to meet standards for a lot of the energy incentive programs, including HUD's programs. Next slide. Level 2 gets more detailed. You're going to get a building survey. You're going to inspect all the points of interest on the building itself. You're going to look at a larger sample of units. You'll look at least one unit of every type and size. It may not be a completely representative scientific statistical sample, but they're going to look at least one example of everything. So they're going to be it's going to be very well informed. It's going to include a little more detail in the financial analyses of your proposed ECMs. The level 2 also will look at some of the more advanced ECMs, especially if you request it. Solar panel, heat pumps, things like that. Next slide. The level 3 is the most detailed. It's investment grade. It's going to look at a wider range of ECMs. This is the case where if you do a level 3, you're not going to have to also say, plus consider solar for us. That's going to be implied in the level 3. If there are specific technologies, it's always good to list those anyways and not just assume that the auditor will cover them. But the auditor will be able to cover pretty much anything you're interested in considering or learning about. It may include sub-metering. This is where they go in and they use equipment. If your metering is by building, they can sub-meter by units, get very accurate utility usage. That includes a risk assessment and the most accurate of the 3 levels when it comes to the costs and the savings for your ECMs. Next slide. So we've got a copy of this in the toolkit as well. This is just a summary of the scope of the energy audit. You can see level 2 and level 3 cover a lot more things than the level 1, but the level 1 does cover the basics. And the thing to keep in mind about the level 3, it's the level 2 and level 3 cover the same things except for the last 3 items there. But the level 3 is going to have even more detail and more accuracy than the level 2. Next slide. So how do you procure an energy audit? Next slide. So we're not going to go into procurement. PHAs have different procurement processes. I'm just going to say, follow your procurement process. Don't deviate from it. If you need to convince your board to approve this, we do have that Why Do an Energy Audit handout that's going to be in the toolkit, which is just it's a 1-pager, and you can just give it to them at a board meeting, just so they've got that background, understand that energy audit's a good thing. Generally, procurement here is probably going to go through some sort of RFP process. And even if it's not, you're going to put together a statement of work or scope of work. And there's some things that are really useful to have in there. I'm a contractor, so I know from my side what I like to see in an RFP. And I generally like to see the more information, the better, so I can give you a more exact quote. And the energy auditors are going to feel the same way. At the same time, I've gone out and procured subcontractors, so I know, what I'm looking for when I'm doing a procurement, and a lot of that can be expressed in the RFP and help narrow down the people who are responding to folks who can really do a good job at what you're asking for. So specify, the experience, the knowledge. Again, going back to the standards that we just talked about, if you're doing a development that's all single family homes, maybe look for that BPI certification instead of the ASHRAE certification. So that's something you can consider in here. Make sure you check those licenses when they send them in. Check their references as well. Define the level. Any specific ECMs or technologies that the auditor should consider. Don't procure them and then surprise them with something different or something more advanced than they were expecting based on what was in your RFP. Specify whether the energy audit will be performed in conjunction with other inspections or assessments. This is a really good thing. Again, that idea of economies of scope. If you can get the same person in there for one day and they can do 2 or 3 assessments and not just 3 people coming 3 separate times looking at the same thing to do 3 different assessments, you're going to save money. So definitely consider that. There are vehicles where you can do an RFP. Again, you'll have to look at your procurement processes and policies, but generally you could do an RFP, which says, we're asking for 2 or 3 different things. If you can do all of them, respond to all. If you can only do 1 or 2, you respond to those specific things that you can do. That'll give you a wider range of folks to consider in your procurement, a wider range of bidders, and give you a chance to look at, is it really cheaper to have the same person do 2 different assessments at once, or should we have 2 different people do them? So, next slide. Some other things that you should think about putting in your scoping language that from a bidder's perspective is going to be really helpful. And it's information that you're going to need anyways once the auditor is selected. So might as well start putting together and put it out there. Talk about some detailed description of what you're expecting to see in the energy audit and the report. Define specific systems, the complexity of the analysis. You can say it's just going to be a level 2 energy audit, but if you can be a little more specific than that, then that's always helpful to the bidder. Also provide some information beyond, I want you to do an energy audit or a PHA or our development. Say how many buildings you have, how many units, the different types and sizes, the age of the structures, if you know them, the age of the building systems, when's the last time you installed a HVAC system, or how old's your boiler. For common areas and for units, any information you have about lighting and appliances, if you've got Whirlpool dishwashers that were installed in 2018, that's really useful information for the energy auditor, because they can get started thinking about that. That's 6 years ago, so it's a remaining useful life. It's a Whirlpool. They've got this Energy Star rating. What's on the market now, sort of thing. So that information is useful. As a bidder, I would find that useful to see in the RFP. It would help me start doing the work and prepare a really good quote for you. Next slide. So now what happens during the energy audit once you've procured the energy auditor? Next slide. We've got our timeline. We've got a copy of this in the toolkit. We'll have it up in the toolkit as well. Once you procure the energy audit takes about a month. It could be a little longer, could be a little shorter, depending on how big the scope is, if there's any issues with access to the residential units, things like that. But yeah, it's generally going to take 4 to 6 weeks. So next slide. Once you procure the energy auditor, they're going to come to you with a list of questions, data requests. They might want to do an entrance interview with your maintenance staff or with senior staff prior to the visit. They're going to want to see your prior utility bills. They're going to see at least a year, preferably 2 or 3 years of utility bills, any previous energy audits. They're going to be using this for benchmarking and to identify those patterns and give you back that sort of processed information that's really useful for your budgeting and planning. The other thing you're going to need to do is prepare access to the sites. So again, access to occupied units. The auditor is going to want to visit some occupied units. They'll tell you how many and what size. Also consider areas of the building that might need to be entered. If you've got a utility closet in a high-rise building, the auditor is definitely going to want to go in there, so you want to make sure that they can access it. Ideally, someone from the PHA will be accompanying the auditor and learning from the auditor as they go through, but that person's also there to help with the access and to show them where things are. If you're not able to provide that, provide a map of the development of the buildings and mark the location of all the utility registers and other things that the auditor will be interested in looking at. You really don't want them to come back at the end of the day and say, well, I can't tell you anything about, your water use because I couldn't find the meter. Let's get that ahead of time. And the energy auditor is really good at asking for that, but you have to help them in giving them that information. Next slide. Our on-site audit, when they're on site, they're going to be looking at the buildings, the units. They are going to access the occupied units. Again, they'll do some sort of sampling usually. And they'll let you know ahead of time so you can arrange access. They may put some energy monitoring systems in place to record current utility usage. They may interview some of your tenants to learn about their energy consumption habits. I'm just thinking about, we went to one, this isn't quite energy related, but I went to PHA, and they said they had a mold problem, and it was kind of weird because it was a dry climate. And what they had ended up doing is they found someone who was, one of their tenants was making tamales to sell on the weekends. So they just had a lot of boiling water, a lot of moisture in that unit, and it was causing a mold issue. And they couldn't figure it out until they actually talked to the tenants and found out what was happening. So this is the kind of thing too, they might be saying, you go talk to some of the tenants and you find, well, I'm just cold all the time. So I use a space heater all the time. So that's why your electricity use is higher than the other units. And, it's information like that. And it gives the auditor sort of a human dimension to the energy audit and their energy use. Finally, we highly recommend, and you should put this in your RFP package, scope of work, so the energy auditor is prepared for it, is entrance and exit meetings with PHA leadership. The entrance, just to make sure that leadership knows that the audit process is occurring. And exit, the auditor can provide their initial observations. They'll be expanded in the report. But it gets your leadership excited about it. Make sure that they know to expect this report and that you're going to be coming to them with these great ideas for energy incentive projects and saving money. Next slide. So following the on-site portion, it usually takes a week or two for the auditor to finalize the report, write up the rest of the report, calculate costs and savings from the ECMs. Once they give you all the report, it gives you an opportunity to think about project execution strategy. How do you want to bundle these ECMs, the higher cost and the lower cost ones based on the projected savings? You look at the financing options, including all those energy incentive programs. And then you can select some contractors to implement the ECMs or do it in-house. Next slide. All right, we are just about wrapped up here. We're about 5 minutes ahead of schedule, which is great. We've got plenty of time for questions and answers. I've seen some questions in there. Let me just do a quick wrap up, and then we'll turn it back to Joshua and Charles, and they can take any of your more detailed questions. Next slide. So, big takeaways are energy audits are a useful tool. Go ahead and do them. I hope we've sold you on the usefulness for them, on how they're going to pay themselves back through savings from the ECMs that are identified, and that they're useful information just in general for your planning, budgeting, operations, and longer-term plans. The energy audits create energy projects, finance them. It has a suite of energy incentive programs, and there are other incentive programs out there, state, local, from the Department of Energy, and from your utilities. Now, you do have to pay for the energy audit up front. It's preferred to be paid through with the operating fund. You can also use capital funds, or you can wrap it into your scope of your energy performance contract if you decide to go look at that seriously. When you are thinking about this, also think about your economies of scale and scope, doing multiple developments at once, or looking at other assessments that could be performed by an energy auditor or an energy auditing firm, which is typically an engineering or architecture firm who are capable of doing a lot of the physical assessments you may need or want at your developments. Next slide. Few of those key resources. The Energy Audit Toolkit on the HUD Exchange. Again, we had some production issues. There's a fair number of coming soons on there that we're going to populate in the next week or so. They should all be up by the end of the month. We'll send out an email to you all when they're all up, as well as these slides and the recording of this webinar. Got the Build for the Future Funding Navigator, which is a great resource for funding related to energy conservation. And then, of course, the HUD Energy Branch, which has a lot of information. It's an excellent subsite of HUD.gov. It's got a lot of information on those energy incentive programs that Joshua talked about. Next slide. A few of the other resources, and we do have links to these on the toolkit page. ASHRA, BPI, Department of Energy, Association of Energy Engineers. This one, I totally blanked on this. I really apologize. This is pretty important. Department of Energy, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory has a document when it's called Energy Audit Guide. And we do have a link to it on the HUD Exchange in the toolkit. There's also a standalone resource page for it on the HUD Exchange, so you can just search for it. What that has in its appendix, it has model RFP language for an energy audit. So that's your starting point. I bet there's a couple questions like, do you have a model RFP? We do, and it's in that. You can start there when you're going out to procure a energy audit, and it's a great starting point, but you will want to go through and add in a lot of that detail that we just discussed. And then there's Energy Star information. It's not just for appliances. You can also look at it in terms of multifamily housing and other building types. Next slide. Excellent. So I'm going to turn it back over to Joshua and Charles. See if we've got some questions here. I know they've answered some in the chat, but they might want to go over those verbally. And I think there's a few more questions in here that we need to cover.
Thank you, Alex. I guess are we going to open it up for live questions if anybody's got one? I've been answering a lot of the questions in Q&A directly.
You need to raise your hand so I can unmute the audio if anybody wants to ask a question live. Hello?
Your audio is very quiet, Ms. Ward.
Okay. I wanted to, hello. So if I am a new ED and I'm sure we've had an energy audit, but I don't really know when it was done. Would I get that information from my field office, or is that like inputted in one of our systems where I could pull that up?
Unfortunately, I don't believe so. Charles might correct me. I don't think the energy audits, they've not been a reporting requirement. They're a requirement, but there's not a submission requirement.
Yeah, let me answer that. So if you don't have record, then you probably need to go ahead and do it. Typically, the PHA tracks when they do their audits. And to say that, of course, it is a requirement you can check with your field office. but we are looking at ways to try to help in managing that. But in the interim, if you don't have a copy of it or you don't know when it was done, I recommend that you go ahead and try to get one done.
Thank you. So that's kind of my second part. So when I do it, I do not turn it in anywhere. I just do it, correct?
Right. The field office may ask for it. So some of the field offices, depending on where you're located, they are tracking it. So you can check with who you work with at your field office to see how they handle it on the local level.
Thank you.
There's been a lot of changes in the past few years in this industry and area too. So it's even if you've done one 4 or 5 years ago, it's going to be a lot of new stuff that a current one will give you. A lot of new information.
I see a few questions that were in the Q&A. So one was, is this a requirement if you do not pay for resident utilities? So if this is PHA paid utilities, if you have any PHA paid utilities, it is a requirement that you have an energy audit completed. Another question was, is there some way to predict what an energy audit may cost, like cost per unit or something? There are some averages out there in terms of per square foot. Alex, do you have any thing that you may know in terms of the average cost per square foot of audits? I know you mentioned earlier that some may be free if they're done through some utility companies will do them. So that may not cost you anything.
Yeah, this is a tough one to say because it depends on the size of the development, the number of buildings, the number of units. My guess is this question is coming along the lines of procurement rules and certain thresholds in there, and it's really hard to answer that without more information. My suggestion is check with your field office, see if they've had a similar size PHA that you could ask about it, or ask your peers if you've got a local or regional PHA group. You can also reach out to some of these industries, the Association of Energy Engineers. They may be able to give you a ballpark figure, but again, the exact quote is going to come down to the size, the level of the energy audit, the number of buildings, the number of units.
And I see in here there's a comment regarding, so if if the tenants pay all their utilities, we are not required. If and more than likely there is some energy being used in general areas, for example, the offices, some of the general space, then you still need to do an energy audit on those spaces. But as far as the units, it helps. It would not hurt. So we're not telling you not to do it, but it definitely for those spaces where you have PHA paid utilities.
And again, this is an opportunity to do something to help your tenants as well. It's advantageous to them, and that making your tenants happy makes you happy.
I have a question. Tim Barnes. I work in Minneapolis for PHA, and we have a 20-year contract with the ESCO provider. And the ESCO provider came probably last year and wanted to get us involved in the Energy Star program, except there was a lot of cost involved. And, we're in a 20-year contract with this energy provider, which in itself has a pretty good cost. What is your findings, or what do you see with the Energy Star program? What are the average costs that a P&K may have to incur to be involved in that program?
Well, Mr. Barnes, you've said a couple things there. One, with regards to, it sounds like you have an energy performance contract.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay, so
Yeah.
if you have an energy performance contract, your ESCO should be coming out each year to do measurement and verification to make sure that you are getting the savings that you had contracted with them to get.
Yes.
And so they should be coming out each year and actually laying eyes on your property and saying how well and letting you know how you're performing. As
We
far as
do have
Energy
that.
Star, they are doing that.
Yeah, we have 2 days out of the week, we have two employees from this company that are managing our building automation system, and then looking at all of our energy, gas, and water usage, and submitting reports to our city and our officials here in our PHA.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's good. So with regards to Energy Star, of course, HUD has no requirement that you participate in Energy Star, although there are some benefits from using Energy Star products. And there is some guidance from EPA on what is required to actually get certified in Energy Star. So you may find some benefits with that, and actually may find some additional savings. And I would just also encourage, this may be an opportunity. How old is your EPC?
Let's see, 2009 it started. So.
Oh wow, yeah. So and you probably have some more things there that you can save on. And
Right.
so you can either do a new EPC or you can do a phase two. But in order to do that, you're going to need to do an energy audit. That's one of the things that Alex had mentioned earlier. And if you do an energy audit, of course, they will be using more efficient standards that we have today versus what was in 2009. And you will
Right.
find that you're probably going to have some more savings, and you may have enough savings to actually pay for what you plan to install through that energy audit. But the energy audit is kind of like the first step to identify what it is, and once you identify it, then you can determine, do you want to implement it as a project? And of course, you can use some of the programs that you can do another EPC, you can do a UPP, or there are other ways now with some of the IRA money, the Inflation Reduction Act money, and some of the other funds that are coming out through some of those tools that were mentioned earlier to help pay for it. The cost of the audit also can roll into an EPC, so there may not be any upfront out-of-pocket expenses to do an audit if you're doing it either with your current ESCO or any other ESCO. You have some options. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. You have quite a few options, so you don't have to go down one road. But ultimately, the energy audit will give you the list and the itemized detail of what's available on your property, and then you can go from there to decide how you want to implement it, which ones and how. And the financing piece can be done through a number of ways, through one of our programs, through the operating fund incentive programs, or you can use a number of other opportunities as well. So we'll be glad to give you if you have some other questions, we'll be glad to answer those. I think they've provided contact information for the energy branch. And so we'll be glad to respond to you and give you any kind of assistance that we can give you.
Great, because the only reason I ask, I like our energy company, the company, the ESCO. They've been great. But, I grew up a farm boy, and I always get nervous about the box garden, the hen house, and I think, what is the best deal for us? I want to make sure we're getting the best bang for the buck and, for the residents and et cetera. So,
yeah, you have many options available to you, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Well, are there any other questions?
Hi, my name is David Gonzalez. I'm calling from Philadelphia. I've just joined this session because I wanted to learn more about what HUD is doing. Over the last 7 years, we've been reporting our energy through what we call in Philadelphia the portfolio manager. We do that on a yearly basis, and we also contract with a company called Square Energy, who've come out and certified our buildings through the Environmental Protection Agency program. 6 of our buildings have been EPA certified as green buildings. We're working on the other 3, but as I'm thinking this through, is this with regards to this program, the energy brand, is this a HUD requirement? Is it better that I engage my AE and have HUD come in and do a second assessment? So I'm kind of like thinking these things through, and I want to make sure that we're being compliant.
Sure. So the energy audit itself, that's what this training is about. The training is about the energy audit, and it is required to be completed by the Public Housing Agency at least every 5 years. So if you are doing it with your ESCO, or you're doing it with, you've got a contractor that is working with you for, sounds like you're participating in the EPA Energy Star program.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. What the energy audit does is essentially give you a list of ECMs, energy conservation measures. And he mentioned earlier 3 levels, 1, 2, and 3. And so
Right.
they will identify savings. They'll also identify, the cost, so you can kind of see what the response, what is the payback for it. And, and there are a number of ways that you can actually implement them. So this training is primarily focusing on the energy audit. And it is it's a requirement, but it is also a vehicle to do capital planning, to just see what is available on your property, to improve whether you do it in a larger project or you decide to do it inside of your annual operations and maintenance. I mean, it just depends on how you want to do it.
Okay. Even we report to different entities. The way we have it set up, we're the owners of our properties, and we participate with HUD, PHA, and other agencies that provide subsidies. So we kind of like do these things on our own. Although, we stay very close to what the HUD requirements are to be compliant in all of our properties. One of the things that's come up is that we're looking at installing solar panels in some of our properties. We just don't know how to go about it, so to speak. So that's kind of like one of the things that we are looking at as a major capital investment in our properties.
Sure. So and this will help identify some of those things.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier, will HUD come and do the assessment for you? No, they won't.
Okay.
But what we are doing is we are providing you the tools to be able to find those
Okay.
people who are trained to do it.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Got a couple questions in the question and answer that I think I can handle. What are HUD requirements once your energy audit is completed? Do you have to submit a report through Epic? You should make a note of it in your reporting in your annual plan that you did do the energy audit. It's been a while since I've been in Epic, so I don't know if there's a way to just attach that report in there. You should definitely let your field office rep know that you've done it. Maybe send them a copy of the reports for their records. Those are the requirements that I know of for it. Is a level 1 energy audit required to be done by a certified auditor? Yes. All energy audits to meet the requirement need to be done by a certified auditor. We touched on some of the certification requirements. ASHRA, BPA, and ASHRA and BPI, or ASHRA is the most popular. BPI is also very common. There's a few other certifying agencies or associations out there. You can check and see what's them, see if they're supported by the Department of Energy. That's kind of the gold standard when it comes to energy audits. So. All right. I think we've got a couple of those other questions were answered in the chat. So. Jennifer, do we have any other folks looking to ask question verbally?
Not right now, but if you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll unmute you.
So I see where someone dropped one in the chat. Once
Yeah.
all the updates are completed and no other ECMs are feasible, must they still be done? So I'm not sure if you're talking about the ECM or the energy audit. The ECM and the actual to implement them, that is the choice of the PHA. What it essentially is presenting you is an opportunity to save energy by putting in more efficient equipment, by identifying methods to save you energy and water. So hopefully, we hope that once you do the audit, you'll find something to implement. But, is it mandatory that you do it? No.
The energy audit itself is a requirement every 5 years, and what you find is because of the pace of technological advancement, 5 years from now, there's going to be new ECMs or more efficient ECMs that an energy audit is going to find for you. They may, it may be a case where they find that there's not anything new that's going to be cost effective to install. But my guess is the way things are changing in the industry and have been changing for the past 5 or 10 years, there's going to be some new technologies 5 years from now that are going to be pretty exciting, and an energy audit is going to identify.
Someone asks, is the energy auditing required for single-family homes? There are some public housing agencies that do have single-family homes as a part of their portfolio that are ACC units. So for those, yes. Now, there may be those that have single-family homes in other programs or even outside of HUD. I mean, I'm not sure who all is on here. But an energy audit, and this is just really practical, is good for your home. You're as an individual to save some money on your own utility bills. And as Alex mentioned earlier, you can actually use some of your utility companies to do it. So, it's definitely an opportunity to identify savings in any of the type of built environment. And we've got a few more here. Let's see. Is a paper or electronic report necessary to prove the energy audit was complete? You should get a report. Any thoughts on that, Alex?
I hope you get a report. I think this might tie to another question that was in there that I think Joshua answered. About having someone come out and install, low flow faucet aerators and LED lights, and is that sufficient for an energy audit? We are looking for an energy audit report with that information at a minimum. The core ECMs, the cost, and the expected savings. It's really useful information. I hope you got that from our webinar and from the slides, and that's something that you would expect from your energy auditor, and the energy auditor should expect to give you a report.
There's one in here regarding environmental reviews. We do environmental reviews for all PH properties. And there is a section for energy audit purpose and scope, energy conservation measures, etc. So I'm not sure what the question was. Looks like more of a statement. So
it's got cut off. They're asking if that environmental review with the energy audit section is sufficient for the energy audit requirement.
The energy audit, the energy audit is actually something separate. So than the environmental review.
Yeah,
They're two different kind of things. Yeah.
I think you'd have to look at the specific verbiage in that environmental review. It's, environmental review is one of those things that can mean a lot of different things to different people. So
Right.
If you want to send us the scope of work for the environmental review, we can take a look at it and let you know if it's covered. If the environmental review includes having a certified energy auditor on site and gives you energy conservation measures, then yes, I'd say that the part of the environmental review would cover the energy audit. So yeah, I'd say, look at the verbiage, look at the qualifications of the folks who are coming out and doing that part of the environmental review. And if they're certified energy auditors and they're giving you what you would expect in the report, the stuff that we went over in the slides today, then yeah, I'd call that an energy audit. If they're not, I'd say, yeah, you'd have to do a separate energy audit.
And just a reminder, as mentioned earlier, when you have a professional complete an energy audit, there should be some report that comes out afterward that would actually tell you what you have and what you have available on your property. So is there
also there?
Go ahead, Alex.
Is there anyone else out there, Jennifer, looking to ask a question?
No more hands are raised. There were a couple of questions early in the chat, but I think you've covered most of those. And just so everybody knows, the link to the toolkit is in the chat, and there was a technical issue. We are having that corrected, and we will be adding all of the tools that Alex has mentioned as soon as possible. So hopefully this week. And then we'll also have a link to the recording available as well. And somebody had asked about seeing the Q&A. That is saved by Zoom, but I will have to download that, and I will we'll see if it makes sense to add that to the toolkit.
Great. Well, thank you all for attending. I hope you got a lot out of this. I apologize that for the production issues with the energy audit toolkit page on the HUD Exchange. We'll get those tools up as soon as we can, and definitely by the end of the month. We'll send an email out when all the tools are up, as well as this recording and the copy of the slides. Thank you so much, and have a good rest of your day.